Welcome to the Solid Verbal. And now, Dan and Ty.
Dan Rubenstein, we officially have a 12-team college football playoff field. The committee, ESPN, you could argue the mouthpiece for the committee, decided that they were going to release the rankings after much fanfare. It's about 1:23 p.m. Eastern time. We had originally scheduled to do this one at 5 p.m. Eastern time.
Yeah.
I needed to get some stuff off of my chest. We will get to that in just a second. If you are just tuning in, hit follow, hit subscribe so that you do not miss any of our upcoming episodes or content. Go back and listen to the content we dropped earlier this morning where we talked through what transpired on championship week, the games of note, the storylines of note, and so on and so forth. In effect, this is a part 2 to build on what we discussed late into the evening, Saturday night / Sunday morning. Dan Rubenstein. We have our field. The committee revealed its results.
I'll flash it on the screen. Okay.
We can talk through what that means. We can talk through ideal pathways. We can talk through really anything that is grinding our gears. I've got a few things that I would like to discuss with you.
Of course.
But at present, here's where things stand. Indiana, the undisputed number 1 team in college football, 13-0, knocked off Ohio State. They did exactly what we expected. They flipped Indiana and Ohio State. It was a 3-point game, 13-10. Instead of Ohio State being 1, Indiana's now 1. Ohio State is number 2. Georgia at 3 makes a lot of sense, as does Texas Tech at number 4 by virtue of their respective conference championship victories in the SEC and the Big 12. Once we get through that initial field, the top 4 who get first-round byes, we talk about your Oregon Ducks holding steady at number 5, Ole Miss holding steady at number 6, Texas A&M and Oklahoma also holding steady at 7 and 8. Interestingly enough, Alabama holding steady at number 9 despite a 21-point loss in the SEC championship game. We will get there in a second.
Have to.
At number 10, it is Miami. The Hurricanes at the gun get the nod over Notre Dame to grab that final playoff spot. They are going to be your number 10 team in this tournament. And then to round out the field, after much discussion about the ACC's place in all of this, and especially with a 5-loss ACC champion, Tulane gets the number 11 spot, and James Madison gets the number 12 spot. So we have 2 G5 teams that have found their way into this tournament field, which I actually think is kind of cool. Good for them to get this. 2 coaches, by the way, that are going to be going elsewhere after the playoffs. So that is kind of its own subplot altogether, Dan Rubenstein. The first team out, the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. The second team out, the BYU Cougars. You could go a little bit further down the line if you want to. I think Texas was the next one up.
Mm-hmm.
For all intents and purposes here, though, the graphic that we've got on our screen represents the top 14 teams with respect to how that translates to a bracket. You've got Oregon hosting James Madison with the winner squaring off against Texas Tech.
I believe that's the Saturday night at 7:30 Eastern game. Yep.
Correct. The Friday night game is going to be Oklahoma, the 8, hosting Alabama, the 9, with the winner getting the rights to square off against undefeated Indiana. On the bottom side of the bracket, we've got number 6 Ole Miss playing host to Tulane. This is a rematch of a 45-10 game that we saw earlier in the year. The winner of that one is going to square off against Georgia.
Yep.
And last but certainly not least, number 7 Texas A&M playing host to number 10 Miami. The winner of that matchup squares off against Ohio State, Dan Rubenstein. So we've got a lot to discuss here. Why don't we start at the very top, though, because I think Indiana has deserved as much. Indiana won. I don't think there is much dispute over Indiana being the 1.
No.
Do we agree with how they handled Ohio State in light of that loss, dropping them only 1 spot down to number 2?
Yeah, I mean, Ohio State was 12-0. It was a hard-fought game. It was very tight. It was 13-10. It came down to, Indiana outplaying them in the second half. Ohio State had a couple opportunities late to tie it or take the lead, and Indiana was able to hold on. Indiana proved itself to be the clear number 1, and I'm fine with, as impressive as Georgia was yesterday, with Ohio State going into their conference championship game having acquitted themselves well, at least on defense. I'm fine with them number 2. Yeah.
The remainder of the top 9 was also kept intact, right? I think Texas Tech obviously belongs at number 4. I think Georgia obviously belongs at number 3.
Yep.
Any dispute on your end with how they handled, let me say, the next group of 4 teams? We won't talk about Alabama quite yet, but
okay.
Oregon's standing pat at 5. We've got Ole Miss at 6. We've got Texas A&M at 7. We've got Oklahoma at 8. I know Greg McElroy on the ESPN broadcast had something to say about Texas A&M being below Ole Miss, maybe even below Oregon in light of the season that they had. I did find it a little bit strange that they would drop A&M as much as they did after that loss to Texas, but obviously still in the field, obviously still hosting a first-round playoff game. Not going to say I have that big of a gripe with it. They kind of kept it in state from a week ago, so I think we've had ample time to digest that right now. But you're cool with that too. You're good with that.
I don't know. I mean, look, you're trying to understand what the committee is thinking with keeping Texas A&M beneath Ole Miss, and I guess the thinking in this specific scenario, if they were 3 before, is that Texas A&M had a schedule that did not feature basically anybody near the top other than Texas within the SEC. Their best win came in week 2 or 3 against Notre Dame, and their control over a lot of those games, whether it was against Arkansas, whether it was against South Carolina late in the season, whether it was against, I believe, Auburn was close. Yes?
Right.
Auburn was 16-10. That they did not feel like Texas A&M was as in control as I guess they thought Ole Miss was within the SEC. Let's also remember Ole Miss barely beat Washington State. This is not a perfect Ole Miss schedule. It's not a perfect Ole Miss season. I think if anything, they just sort of looked at it as a later season control issue from Texas A&M. I don't know if I fully agree, but it's hard to make a strong argument in favor of Texas A&M over Ole Miss. It's just where you fall on the margins.
How do we feel about 2 G5 teams getting in?
These are the rules everybody signed up for. And it's not on these teams. It's not on the committee. The committee had no choice with regard to James Madison and Tulane. Obviously, these aren't teams that were even really on the fringe of the top 12, but this is what we signed up for. And the committee didn't have the foresight to think a 2025 unicorn of a major conference champion Duke could exist. And that's on them. That's on, the conference commissioners, not the committee, the conference commissioners and those in charge of the playoff structure. It's on them, and you sort of reap what you sow. And here is the reaping part.
Here it is. We've had a bunch of people write in about this, but if the ACC had a different set of tiebreakers, if instead of common opponents record, it was committee ranking, Miami would be in, Notre Dame would be in as well, and maybe that would benefit the ACC down the line. Maybe that could be a change that we see in the immediate future. I don't know, but that is what allowed Duke to get into this game in the first place, to win the ACC with 5 losses and put the ACC sort of a guy down. They have their conference champion who's not going to be part of this because of the weird tiebreakers they had. Miami is going to be part of it. We can get to that next. But that is one aspect, I think, of the system right now that I would look at in the immediate short term as something that we're going to see patched up before long, because I don't think they want that. I do think if it weren't for, a really solid Miami team, that the ACC would have any reps in this at all. So that is something that I think we're going to see relatively soon. Now let's get to the part that everybody.
By the way, but just
talk about.
Yes, we are. The only other thing I would tag on as it relates to the G5 is the committee, as you're going to mention, is just going to do what it wants, and they could have just ranked Duke ahead of James Madison because they want, if they had wanted to, right? They could have ranked Duke ahead of James Madison, who obviously was going to be behind Tulane. Now, James Madison was ranked last week, but whatever was ranked last week, again, you're about to get to this, doesn't matter. It just doesn't matter. So the committee, with easy justification, could have said, oh, yeah, we're putting Duke at number 21 and James Madison's number 22. And that's just sort of how we felt with the win over a top 20 Virginia. I think, the best of, they could have used garbled language to defend putting Duke ahead, They didn't in that instance.
I
Because
mean, why stop now? Why stop now, Dan? We've been doing it the whole damn time. Why stop now?
That's what I'm saying. They could have just done it. I don't know.
Congratulations to both Tulane and JMU.
Yes.
I will be rooting like hell for both of those teams. It is a great story for both of those schools. It sucks that both coaches are now leaving, but at a minimum, it's a really nice accomplishment for them. They both had terrific seasons, and I look forward to having them in there. As somebody who has argued for a long time that if they were all technically going to be on the FBS level, you should at least extend the olive branch, do something to include all of the conferences.
Yes.
And by having both schools in here, I think it does achieve some level of inclusion. So I'm happy about that. I think from a just general principled standpoint that I've always had here.
It's fine. I don't know if I'm looking forward to these specific matchups. Like,
I mean, you're an Oregon fan. You're definitely looking forward to these specific matchups.
No, but
it benefits your team greatly.
It benefits the team I root for, but in terms of just like a pure competitive standpoint, it would be hard to get up for if James Madison weren't playing Oregon, if JMU or Tulane were playing, Oklahoma or Texas Tech or whoever. Like, you're just like, well, that's a different kind of matchup, and you hope that it's more competitive than it seems at the moment. I don't know what the early line on Oregon James Madison is. Is it in the 20s?
It might be 120. I haven't seen it yet.
But either way, I am good in spirit with making this inclusive at like the peril and at the cost of keeping out like a 9-3 team that really didn't look like a playoff team. So it's fine.
All right. Can we talk about the other stuff now?
Let's.
There are a couple bones of contention over here in Solid Verbal East, maybe out there in Solid Verbal West, maybe all throughout the Verballerhood with how the committee handled the remainder of this field. And by that, I am referring to number 9, Alabama, number 10, Miami, and in this case, number 13, Notre Dame, and I'll even lump BYU in there at number 14. There are a couple different things that we can talk about here. Now, I think it goes without saying that the committee going the entire month of November ranking Notre Dame ahead of Miami, only to put Miami ahead of Notre Dame in the 11th hour because BYU was docked for losing its conference championship game, which they didn't do for Alabama, by the way, because how dare we do something like that to an SEC champ or an SEC championship contender. Yes. Anyway, that's neither here nor there. We'll get to that. But now because we have Miami and Notre Dame back-to-back, this is the logic they use to move Miami ahead of Notre Dame and to give them the final spot. Everybody listening to this knows that I am a Notre Dame fan. I am incredibly disappointed that Notre Dame did not get the nod after being fed for a month straight this nonsense that the committee valued what Notre Dame was doing, that the committee wasn't necessarily comparing them against Miami. They were comparing them against the likes of Alabama and so on and so forth.
Right. And that they were saying like it was Hunter Yurachek, by the way, SEC athletic director, university executive, voice of the college football committee after the previous voice was let go for allegedly trying to start a fight with an active tight end on his own team.
Love it.
Allegedly.
Love it.
The defense there, in his words, I am paraphrasing his words, so maybe not his exact words, was we weren't comparing them. Miami had just lost 2 of 3, so we were weighing where they were at that moment, so we weren't thinking about their whole season record. We only started doing that now, which is, of course, a bullshit. Continue.
I am disappointed as a fan, but I would say out of principle, head-to-head should count for something.
Agree.
What is confusing to me is why it took so long to get here. And this is not just a Notre Dame or a Miami thing. This is a college football fan question that I think is very real, regardless of fandom. Miami and Notre Dame played. First week of the year, we've had a lot of time to digest that game. It was close. Notre Dame is in a much different spot now. I'm going to recuse myself from deciding who I would pick if the two teams played tomorrow.
Right.
But head-to-head should count. And so, at least as just a principled point of view, putting Miami in over Notre Dame, though I am disappointed, I understand that logic.
Sure.
What I have issue with is why it took so long to get here. I understand they're doing a show. I understand they've got commercial inventory they would like to sell. But why it took this long to kind of come to that realization amid everything else going on around college football, they could have saved us all a lot of time just by saying that, yeah, we're going to actually give them the benefit of the doubt here. Miami
3
had
weeks
worse
ago.
losses than
Yeah.
Notre Dame. Okay. And Miami definitely stumbled in the middle part of their season. They have looked very good as of late. And I am happy for Miami that they got in while simultaneously being crushed that my team didn't.
Right.
But I get that point of view. I really do. I just don't understand the timing of it.
Right.
I
agree.
What I take greater issue with is these verbal gymnastics that they have tried to put Hunter Yurachek through to explain how they penalize some conference championship losers and not others.
Right.
Okay. And I pointed this out a bunch of times on X the Everything app over the last 24 hours. But if you take last year as an example, every team that played in a conference championship game and lost, all of these cases were by one score. All of those teams, without exception, dropped a few spots in the polls. Penn State dropped a spot. Texas dropped a spot. SMU dropped 2 spots. All of those games were close. It was a 3-point game, an 8-point game, and a 3-point game, respectively. Alabama played in a conference championship game. Not only did they pick up a third loss, but they lost that game by 21 points.
Fact checked. True.
They did not move an inch. An inch in this latest poll.
Buddy, they moved up by barely beating Auburn, who I don't believe has a winning record last week and with an interim coach. Sneaking by Auburn, moved them up, and Notre Dame destroying whoever it was, Stanford last week, or moved them down, right?
What about BYU, Dan? Okay, so by that same logic,
Sure.
if you're going to get crushed in a conference championship game, why does BYU then get docked? Right? They move BYU out of their spot, which moves Miami up, which puts them next to Notre Dame, which gives them right to move them then ahead of Notre Dame because of the head-to-head tiebreaker, which I'm not really arguing.
Right.
I understand. But why is it not good enough for BYU, but it is good enough for Alabama to kind of keep them where they're at? You know, listen, we talk about a lot of fun stuff on this show.
Yeah.
We make a lot of dumb jokes. It's not for everybody. I get that. And sometimes we put weird theories out into the ether. And 95% of the time, that is all tongue in cheek.
But
even we don't believe it. It's just fun.
Yeah.
After seeing what they did here and how they handled Alabama, this to me represents about as tangible a proof as we are going to get that there is some kind of SEC bias going on. I'm sorry. They lost by 21 points and they're not going to move an inch. Yeah. I get that you don't want to upset the balance of the force with respect to conference championship games. Everybody in that room probably cares about conference championship games and not sending them the way of the dinosaur. Great.
Yeah.
They dropped everybody last year by at least 1 spot.
Mm-hmm.
They dropped teams this year by 1 spot. Everybody except the SEC team in Alabama, who, by the way, even Kirk Herbstreit himself said on the broadcast that they've been leaking oil. And damn straight they've been leaking oil because I watched that game yesterday. Mm-hmm. They didn't belong on the same field as Georgia.
By the way,
I'm not even arguing. Shut up.
Yeah.
I'm not even arguing that Alabama should be completely out of the playoff field. I think Alabama is still a very good team. But their inconsistency with how they handle these conference championship games and the conferences involved in the conference championship games is something that I have a major issue with.
Sure.
So this has been an embarrassment the full way through for this committee. From the guy who runs it getting kicked off it, or I guess stepping aside, right on through their logic for at the 11th hour moving one team above another, how they handled conference championship games for Alabama versus, or I guess I should say the SEC versus everybody else. And as you said to me, and I think rightfully so before we went on the air here, congratulations, you are witnessing the final year of the College Football Playoff Selection Committee.
I think
it can't be a moment too freaking soon.
Yeah. Is there anything else that
there will be, but go ahead. You can talk now.
Okay. So look, the cynic, as you bring up the SEC bias thing, the cynic is just like, look, the thing that can't suffer within this sport is anything that affects television, and not having major matchups in September and not having a conference championship game would affect television. And so these conference championships need to be important, kind of. And so that's why the BYU thing matters. The explanation was they lost without seeming more competitive than they were the first time when they lost in Lubbock. And so we dinged them for that.
Right.
Alabama went 5 straight quarters without scoring against Georgia. Listen again. Alabama did not score in the second half of a win. It's good to win. You should reward the win. And then they started this game out yesterday not scoring for the first 3 quarters.
Yeah, and
5
like
straight quarters,
not really getting
0
across the
points.
50-yard line for like 3 quarters.
Right. And you know what? If you're looking at the totality of the resume, if you're looking at head-to-head, if you're looking at what Alabama accomplished during this season, I think the correct way to look at, the conclusion you should come to with Alabama is they're right there with Auburn and South Carolina. I don't know if there's a single Alabama fan, especially if you look at the comments on all of the game recaps that were popping up online last night. They were all, we're not going to make the playoff, and frankly, we don't deserve to. That's every single comment. That is the conclusion that Alabama fans, after watching the Georgia game, came to. Now, every Alabama fan is not the same. They are on the level with South Carolina and Auburn and a little bit less than Oklahoma, which I guess technically they are in this rankings, right? They lost to Oklahoma at home in like a pathetic offensive showing. Stop me if you've heard this before. Alabama losing in a pathetic offensive showing. Like, clearly this offense didn't work the back half of the schedule. So they're not dinged for a conference championship game with a history of being dinged for conference championship games. They move up after an unimpressive win against Auburn. And the case against Notre Dame and the case against Miami are pretty clear, right?
Listen, I'm disappointed, but I get that. That logically,
right.
I get that. And again, it's one thing to be disappointed.
Mm-hmm.
It's another thing to say that it's a bad faith argument. I don't think it's a bad faith argument. I think the way that they presented it, at least now, I mean, it took them forever to get here.
Right.
But at least the way that they presented it, though I am disappointed, makes a ton of sense. These teams we thought were very comparable. They were comparable in week 1. It was a 3-point game. They looked at all the stats. They were basically the same. We're going to break the tie by giving it to the team that won on the field. Great. That makes sense to me. That's logic.
That's logic.
That is logic. Why don't we use that across the board?
It's also, as we've talked about and we've mentioned, if week 1, if Labor Day weekends, late August, does matter that much, that it is the most important tiebreaker when you're comparing similar schedules. Obviously, Miami with a full ACC schedule, Notre Dame with a partial ACC schedule. Florida State played Alabama that weekend. And so if you compare those 3 teams, nobody had that level of loss.
No.
As disappointing at moments as SMU and Louisville were for Miami, Notre Dame had a loss to Miami and a loss to Texas A&M. The case against Notre Dame, to me, aside from the head-to-head loss, but just more broadly speaking, is Notre Dame has more control over their schedule, and they don't play in a conference championship game. Sidebar, if it's an advantage to not play in a conference championship game because it can affect you, why can't it affect Alabama?
That's right.
So there's the sidebar there. No, the case against Notre Dame is you have more control over your schedule. And so sometimes you can schedule teams on neutral sites, or you can schedule G5 teams like Notre Dame has over the years when they schedule, the service academies, what have you. And the service academy, the Navy team they played this year was good. That you need to exert a terrific amount of force, and Notre Dame did. But also, if you don't play a lot of highly ranked teams, if you don't play a lot of top 20 teams like the best of the SEC schedules have, then you have to perform in those games. Yeah. And Notre Dame didn't just lose to Texas A&M. They gave up 41 points at home, with their strength eventually becoming their defense. But they got run through and around and over and by against Texas A&M, and they lost to Miami close. And so
they lost by 1 point to Texas A&M on a botched extra point. Okay, so I hear you. I hear you.
They would have tied with the extra point, and they gave up a game-winning touchdown to a tight end who never catches balls.
Right? No, that's fair. And, we could say the same about Texas A&M giving up 40 points.
Of course.
Against a Notre Dame offense that at that point in the season was not fully developed. So I get it. I think it cuts both ways, but A&M won that game. So fair enough.
The margin for Notre Dame is less because you can take a look at a team
I agree with that.
That plays in a conference and say they have no control over their conference schedule, right? That sometimes it's going to be a murderer's row like what Oklahoma's was this year, or Texas's is sometimes, or was this year. And sometimes it's just going to be a fortunate schedule like we had with, the ACC championship teams with Duke and Virginia. And
I'm shaking my head. Yes, I agree with you.
But I'm saying that's the case against Notre Dame. I just
Sure.
think people are making the wrong case right now because Notre Dame themselves played like a playoff team after those 2 losses. And those are good losses. And if your losses have to matter, just like wins have to matter. The thing that really annoyed me about the Alabama thing was this is Hunter Yurichek's paraphrased words, is we looked at the totality of Alabama's schedule. So obviously including the worst loss to a team that hasn't won a road game in 2 years. Well, and we said, they also have a pretty incredible win that they were able to beat the SEC champion on the road in September. And the only reason that Georgia is the SEC champion is because they beat Alabama literally yesterday, 44 minutes ago. And so that tells me and my pea brain that the committee just thought to themselves, we can't put in the 3, 4, 5 and leave out the number 2, even though you definitely can. They lost to a dumb ACC team to start the season, a very important time per the committee.
Dan, that's not even the thing, though.
Yeah?
It's not even about leaving Alabama out of the playoff. It's about some conference championship games meaning something, meaning enough to drop BYU.
Mm-hmm.
And it's about others that were almost as lopsided, not having any bearing whatsoever on the rankings.
Yeah.
Not at all. They didn't drop a lick.
Nothing.
And you know what? They didn't even think about dropping them a lick because it's Ala-frickin-Bama.
I agree.
They had their mind made up before this week. Shame on the committee. What do you call them? Dented avocados on our Twitter?
Yeah. Look. And then the question becomes, okay, if it's a 35-7 loss, what's the threshold for saying Alabama is not performing like a playoff team yesterday?
Dan, what is the impetus for any of these teams?
I agree.
Any of these teams that are in the top 12 to even play their ones in a conference championship game? If it's completely meaningless, completely independent of the final score.
Yeah.
What is the motivation to take your ones out there and risk them getting hurt?
I agree. I think Kirby Smart and Kalen DeBoer should have gone to some sort of like Cracker Barrel or Chili's or something and had a handshake agreement. Let's both pay a fine and not play, or just play a bunch of our walk-ons.
This is old like FIFA World Cup BS.
Yeah.
Where 2 teams could come to a gentleman's agreement like, maybe we just won't score and then we both go through. Right? It wasn't quite that, but what's the point? What's the point? They want to have conference championship games with real meaning, right?
Of course.
That is what I am getting from this.
Have to.
But at the same time, the conference championship games don't really have any real meaning. They just sort of like them because it's an extra game they could sell into.
Yeah. By the way, this, to be clear, is a 9th SEC conference game for these teams. This is not some sort of crazy extra game that no teams would have to, like, this is a 9th game. The Big 10 and the Big 12 already play 9 conference games and then play a 10th in their conference championship game. So this is not an above and beyond moment for both Alabama and Georgia and whoever plays in the SEC championship game. This is not. This is merely a 9th game that the SEC is eventually going to anyway. But it's a pretty pathetic showing. It really is. Like, the case for Alabama is they were good for like 3.5 weeks in October. Like, okay, cool. I'm always going to be a believer that all weeks are not created equal and seasons are living, breathing things. And Georgia just won without 2 of their best receivers and their starting center and managed to find a way to look like Georgia. Georgia didn't look like Georgia the week before against Georgia Tech and managed to find a way to win that game. Like, this is what excellent teams and worthy teams do. And Alabama, just over and over again, is sort of getting a thumb on the scale. And
I am not arguing.
This is our sport.
I am not arguing that Alabama should have been left out entirely.
Yeah.
I am not making that case. But I am saying we need to come to an understanding. Either conference championship games matter and can have some penalty,
right,
if you lose in dramatic fashion, or they don't. We can't have it both ways because this is now a situation where we had it both ways.
Mm-hmm.
It worked against BYU. It worked right against BYU.
Sure.
It worked against other teams that lost. Worked against Ohio State. They dropped one. Doesn't work for Alabama, though, because it's our precious SEC. Beautiful. Yeah. Absolutely. Anyway, listen, I'm going to get off my high horse now.
It's okay.
I, of course, welcome everybody's feedback. I'm not trying to dunk too hard, but I feel very passionately about this. I think it's a joke. I think it's a joke specifically with regard to this. I get the Notre Dame and Miami thing. I am crazy disappointed. I've said that 10 times now. But I get that. I wanted both teams in, but that wasn't going to happen. But the way that they handled this conference championship thing, I think, is an absolute farce.
Do you think there would have been a number if they had lost 52-7?
No.
It's unbelievable. It's great. It really, by the way, once again, tinfoil hat Dan here. They started the show with the Alabama messaging.
Oh, they did. I was just going to bring that up. Yeah.
It was an Alabama anchor tossing to an Alabama quarterback, and then via satellite, a legendary Alabama coach who is a paid consultant with an office on campus at Alabama. And at this point, it is my belief, if you are taking a paycheck from ESPN, I think you're compromised. There is something about watching this coverage that screams like if McDonald's had a TV network and had an annual award for like, here is the best milkshake or milkshake adjacent product. And it goes to, and we're going to go around this round table. We're going to have the Hamburglar. We're going to have Grimace. Everybody's going to weigh in. I think you got to give it to McFlurry. Yeah. And everybody's like, I think McFlurry is the choice. And you're just like, okay, cool. I think you're compromised. If you take any money from ESPN and you weigh in on the college football playoff, you're just wearing a badge. That's all you're doing.
I mean,
Bill Connolly is compromised. I just see this in the Bill Connolly helped to decide, right? He helped to decide the Mountain West Championship participants. Yeah. Bill Connolly is compromised. He is. And you know what? He's the best. He's the best. But at the same time, if he went on the air, and I believe in my heart of hearts that Bill Connolly's heart is pure. But if he went on and be like, well, you have to consider, though, he's at ESPN. I would.
I don't know, man. I just, okay. Let's flash the bracket up there now.
The bracket.
Let's get away from this for a second. Let's celebrate the teams that are in this playoff field.
Yes.
Let's not talk about the method anymore. There's going to be plenty of time to go over that again, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Here is where things stand right now. Again, we talk through the first round matchups, who the winners of those first round matchups are going to square off against if they make it through into the quarterfinals. As you look across the 12-team field here and these matchups, is there a particular path that jumps out to you immediately? And I'm not just talking the first round, but is there a pathway through to the semifinals that you think rises above the others? Because I have a few thoughts on this as well, but I want to get your take first since I've been dominating here by yelling into this microphone.
I think Indiana's path is pretty good, honestly. Where are they playing that game, by the way?
I believe that's in the Rose Bowl.
That would make sense. That's in the Rose Bowl. So Indiana gets to play in the Rose Bowl against either Oklahoma or Alabama. I don't hate that path because I think Indiana's so buttoned up, right, with what they were able to do, play to play on both sides of the ball. I don't hate that path playing in the Rose Bowl. Again, though, it's how you feel about that, all that extra time, because they won't be playing. Today's December 7th. So that's what, 24, 25 days away?
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's going to 3.5 weeks of, going home for the holidays or, it's an arrhythmic experience. Figuring out portal stuff behind the scenes, figuring out higher stuff for all these, teams that have the bye. It's just a long time. I think Ohio State's path is pretty nice, honestly. Where's that game? That game's Jerry World?
I don't have it in front of me.
Okay. And Oregon's path. Look, you're a 3-touchdown favorite, and it's not great to play against Texas Tech's defense. That is a brutal, brutal ask. But it's across the country for Oregon. It's a good distance for Texas Tech. Texas Tech, I imagine, is going to be just unbelievably just hyped up to be in that matchup. But I don't hate Oregon getting the Texas Tech offense in this one. And Oregon, weirdly enough, I already looked a little bit ahead, and maybe James Madison beats Oregon. Oregon has struggled in the red zone on defense with allowing touchdowns, and Texas Tech has struggled on offense scoring touchdowns in the red zone. So that's like an early read there. So no, I think in terms of upsets, Oregon probably in that 5-4 matchup, if we get it, has a nice path. And then Georgia Ole Miss, I just have no idea what to expect from what Ole Miss looks like with Pete Golding, and Charlie Weiss Jr. is calling the offense there. I'm not putting them through over Tulane immediately, but they did beat Tulane by a comfortable margin this season.
Yeah.
And Tulane has their own distraction with their own coach leaving. So I think the best first round matchup is probably Miami A&M, purely from okay, so we both beat Notre Dame. How are we going to play each other?
Yeah. Well, that's interesting in its own right.
Right.
They've got a common opponent.
That's the best game in round one.
Yeah. So to answer your question from earlier,
yeah,
the winner of the A&M Miami game plays Ohio State in the Cotton Bowl. So perhaps a bit of a home game for Texas A&M, although it's always a home game when Ohio State's involved, right? They travel.
Jerry World, Cotton Bowl, Arlington. Yeah.
That's right. Your Oregon Ducks, should they pull through and knock off James Madison, that will be in the Orange Bowl.
Right.
As I mentioned a minute ago, the Indiana game versus the winner of Oklahoma and Alabama is going to take place in the Rose Bowl. And then the final quarterfinal matchup between Georgia and whoever wins between Ole Miss and Tulane, that will be in the Sugar Bowl. So if Tulane gets through, that'd be fun. But Georgia's probably going to outnumber most of everybody who is going to potentially be in that matchup. I think the path that jumps out to me initially is the Oregon path. And this is something that I talked through with you eons ago now. It feels like forever ago, but Oregon's going to be a healthy favorite. I haven't seen by how much over James Madison. Maybe we can pull that up here as we're talking through all these matchups. I think Oregon matches up particularly well with Texas Tech.
Mm-hmm.
I get what you're saying about the Texas Tech defense. Texas Tech's defense has been incredible, for sure.
Possibly America's best.
I am not enamored with that offense.
Right.
And so I actually see that as a rather low-scoring game, more of a defensive struggle between those two. And I've got Oregon making it through into the semifinal.
Yep.
No knock on Texas Tech. Forgive me, I just don't trust Baron Morton in a high-leverage spot like that. So I've got Oregon making it through into the semifinals. I've got Oklahoma over Alabama in that first matchup. Again, that's a rematch. We saw that one earlier. It was a close game earlier in the year. I think Oklahoma pulls another one out over Alabama. And I think Indiana moves through into the semifinals for a rematch against Oregon.
Right.
On the other side of the bracket, I've got Ole Miss over Tulane. I've got Georgia over Ole Miss.
Sorry, once again, where would that game be? Georgia, Ole Miss?
That would be in the Sugar Bowl.
So that would be in New Orleans inside. We would have Jerry World inside. We'd have the Rose Bowl, likely good weather. We'd have South Florida, likely good weather, though sogginess is on the table.
I like Georgia over Ole Miss. I like Georgia over a lot of teams right now, to be honest with you, with the way that they've been playing. They're one of these teams that has taken a quantum leap here second half of the season, and that culminated with an SEC championship over Alabama yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
Georgia right now, again, the 3 seed. I've got them through to the semifinals. I've got Texas A&M over Miami, and I am a bit on the fence about Texas A&M versus Ohio State, if I'm being real with you.
Right.
I really like this Texas A&M team.
Well, it's a matter of which one shows up when. Yeah.
I really like this Texas A&M team. My inclination is still to go with Ohio State, but I could be swayed off of that. I think for me, that's the toughest part of this bracket to project forward. But gun to my head right now, I'd probably go Ohio State.
Okay, fair enough. So one of the interesting things in looking at these teams who are playing is the recency of interesting, big, meaningful wins. Like Oregon has one in USC, not a playoff team, but a decent win at home. Alabama doesn't have one. Oklahoma has a pretty good Alabama, obviously. Ole Miss has decent wins, though recently, I don't know if I'm missing anything with Ole Miss recently, just in terms of how we're playing. Obviously, they're dealing with off-the-field stuff. They beat Florida, South Carolina. The Oklahoma game was, I think, before Halloween, so they haven't really played a tough opponent recently. Alabama hasn't performed well. Miami hasn't played anybody in a long time. Depending on how you feel about Pitt, I guess maybe that's disrespectful to Pitt. And Texas A&M has not beaten a good team in quite some time. So the recency of results is just interesting to me in terms of like how accurately can we gauge, where this team is right now. I think it's all over the place.
I think you'd be hard pressed to pick anyone at this point other than Indiana.
Period.
Yeah.
By the way,
stop. I mean, they look absolutely legit. Their defensive showing against Ohio State on Saturday night was what stood out the most to me. To be able to win a couple different ways, right?
Yep.
To be able to win with your back to the wall, needing a miracle drive on the road in Happy Valley, emerging victorious, or to be in a bit of a defensive slugfest on a neutral site against a team that has owned the conference now for, a good chunk of time. At least if they haven't been winning the conference title, they've been winning national championships, or it's Ohio State. They're always in the hunt. So to get a win like that in the manner that they did, basically to play physical football, go toe-to-toe with Ohio State and win that one by 3, this is a team that can beat you a multitude of different ways. And I'm not sure I feel much differently about a rematch between them and Oregon should it come to pass, because Indiana showed me something in that game against Ohio State.
Oh, yeah. By the way, in terms of what this year's bracket looks like, in the old system, Indiana's your national champion.
Yeah.
Right? Lone undefeated team. Crown them. In the BCS, we're getting likely Indiana, Georgia?
Right.
In this championship game, without like a huge argument made for like Texas Tech or Oregon. In the 4-team system, you have a Texas Tech Oregon conversation. Oregon, I guess, has the better loss, but didn't make their conference championship game. And Texas Tech, dominated their best opponent twice in BYU and won their conference championship game. So that's an interesting conversation to have. But like, it's not crazy to have a Texas Tech, Georgia, Ohio State, Indiana playoff. Like people will be like, all right, yeah, those are the 4.
Well,
it's just, man, I'm really hoping we have good, interesting matchups here. But how we got here, I think, was pretty screwy again with a committee made up of dented avocados. And yes, Buster Olney, compromised. Mark Messier, compromised. Take your pick. They're all compromised.
I would welcome anyone's feedback out there who's got something to say.
Jessica Mendoza, compromised.
You can either write in solidverbal@gmail.com, hit us up in the comments, hit us up in the chat. We're going to have ample time to go through and discuss these matchups, look at point spreads once they're a little bit more settled, and, of course, go through the feedback that we get from the Verballerhood on just the manner in which they got to these 12 teams. But
do you think, by the way, because you're a Notre Dame human, do you think this was the beginning of a case for Notre Dame to join a conference? Notre Dame's demolishing the ACC if they're playing, obviously, Virginia or Duke in this championship game. And they would have an opportunity, if the tiebreakers were different, to play against Miami once again.
I feel like we get to this moment every so often where we're like, aha, this is the thing that's going to do it.
Yeah. And it might just be a rare year. It seems that like 10-2 for Notre Dame is largely going to be good enough often.
Right. I think it is far more likely that they expand the playoff to 14 or 16 teams than Notre Dame joins a conference in the short term to give themselves potentially a leg up to get into this college football playoff field. Part of me wonders if they were in the Big Ten but did not qualify for a conference championship game, same record, Big Ten schedule, would we have felt differently?
Right.
About the Fighting Irish. I know it's popular to make fun of Notre Dame for being independent. I've gotten it probably about 1,000 times already today. Well, they should join a conference like a real team. Okay, well, if they were in a conference, if they played a Big Ten schedule and they still went 10-2, maybe with a similar strength of schedule, would people have felt differently about Notre Dame in this case? My hunch is yes, because they'd be in a conference and they'd have that label. But in all practicality, it might not have made that much of a difference in terms of the underlying numbers. So I don't know. I just don't think it's likely with how dead set determined they are to remain independent. It is so much a part of their identity as a program on the football side. I know that's not ubiquitous across all of Notre Dame's programs, but
Yeah.
it is such a big part of who they are and who they want to be
Mm-hmm.
that I find it very hard to believe that just one instance of this is going to keep them out. Now, if we've got a 12-team field next year and the same thing happens, if this happens a couple times over, then it's a conversation because they are investing heavily in this football program. Marcus Freeman is clearly a name that is in demand.
Mm-hmm.
And I think at some point, yeah, maybe we get to that moment where it truly does make more sense, if only to help this program get back to the level of winning a national championship. But I think this taken in a vacuum is probably not enough. And being so, they have a vote in that room, and being so, it seems like there's already a lot of momentum on expanding the playoff, albeit nobody knows how. I think that is the more likely outcome, because if this is a 16-team field, even if it's a 14-team field,
Yeah.
Notre Dame gets in easily.
Yeah. I agree. Look, it's just how the committee evaluates things is just going to change day to day. And so doing anything dramatic is pretty silly because the committee will have no idea how it feels about it on Tuesday as it compares to Thursday. And, you can say, Notre Dame should have won those big games. Miami should have beaten SMU. Miami should have beaten Louisville. It didn't matter, right?
No.
They're in a conference. Didn't matter. But they
Yeah.
won the head-to-head game in August, and that apparently is the thing. And I think head-to-head should matter. But if you take in the totality of it, it's just team to team, situation to situation. It's not an easy job. Let's be clear.
No, it isn't.
But
it isn't. I don't envy having that position, and I don't mean to imply that everybody in that room has a hidden agenda or anything crazy like
No.
that. I don't think that's the case. I think these are a lot of people who love college football and want to be part of the process. So that is admirable, but it's just very, very frustrating from the outside in. If you are not a fan of Alabama, even if you are a fan of the SEC, to look at how this is treated inconsistently across conferences with respect to these conference championship games.
Right.
If there truly is no impetus to go in there and win, what is the point of having them? Right?
Agree.
Like Greg McElroy talked about this, speaking of Alabama voices in the room, about how the committee set a precedent last year for not wanting to penalize teams that lost conference championship games. They don't want teams to fall out of the playoff field as a result of losing a conference championship game. Okay.
But they did fall.
But all those teams did fall by a spot or two.
Mm-hmm.
So the fact that this loss by Alabama was way worse than any of those games, and they didn't move an inch.
Right.
I don't know. That doesn't do much to emphasize the value of conference championship games either.
No, not at all.
They were sort of damned if they did and damned if they didn't.
It's,
in fairness to the committee. I mean, there was not a good choice here, but this inconsistency, I think, is going to be a real issue. And I don't expect people are going to be talking any less about it moving forward, because especially now as we're talking about expanding the playoff field, I think it even further degrades the value of conference championship games. And, we will probably arrive organically at this moment where everybody just kind of throws them to the wayside.
Yeah.
And maybe we go more the direction of what Tony Petitti's been saying on the Big Ten side of things, which we should just have playing games to determine who gets in from our conference and go with that instead. I'm not crazy about any of this, mind you, but this inconsistency combined with the fact that they already want to expand this thing, I think has taken us to a point where championship games kind of go bye-bye.
Every quote will make more sense. And I don't know if there's a find and replace function you can use in your Chrome, in your Safari, whatever. Every playoff committee quote will make more sense if instead of a period, you had a comma and by and large. We looked at this and we felt it was important that we grade on this rubric, comma, by and large, right? It's when they feel like applying, where they feel like applying. And I cannot stress enough that the chair of the committee went on ESPN, owners of the college football playoff,
right?
Went on ESPN and with a straight face sold America on the idea of what Alabama did yesterday somehow was more impressive because they had a win earlier over the team that just put them in a locker. It is somehow good, actually, that Alabama lost yesterday because it improved their best win.
Right.
That kind of backwards logic is what gets us to this insanely silly moment. It was good, actually, that Alabama got their shit pushed in. Great. That's all I needed to hear.
Dan Rubenstein, why don't we leave it there? We appreciate everybody who tuned in to watch this live. We went a little bit earlier than expected because I was spitting mad. I put on a collared shirt for the occasion, though. I was excited about this broadcast. I wish for a different outcome, but that's me speaking as a fan. I think everybody knows where I stand on this and some of the inconsistencies that really got me going. I think everybody knows the same about you. So we would welcome anybody's feedback. Again, solidverbal@gmail.com. Leave comments wherever you can, be it YouTube, be it Spotify. Many podcast apps out there allow you to do that now. So we read all of them. We don't always have a chance to respond to all of them, but we do read all of them. We got a lot of them coming in, especially this time of year. If those don't work for you, hit us up on social media. We would love to hear from you. As I like to say, just don't be a dick, okay? Be nice about it. We're all in this because we love college football.
Yes.
We welcome your feedback.
Don't email in digital
diarrhea.
Don't do that.
Is that Morgan Freeman saying diarrhea?
Diarrhea.
Yeah. Okay. Don't do that.
Other than that, though, that's okay.
We've got our field of 12. We will have plenty of time to debate where it goes next. We will talk through bowl matchups on one of our upcoming episodes. We still do need to talk about Penn State hiring Matt Campbell. There's been a lot that is going on in the college football world. We also need to go through signing day. We'll bring our friend Brandon Huffman on at some point here over the next few episodes as well. So just because the regular season and conference championship week is over, we've got playoffs, we've got news, we got a bunch of stuff going. This is the new December in college football. News has not ceased to exist at all. Make sure you hit follow or subscribe so that you don't miss any of those episodes. We're going to do our best to get through all of that.
Yes.
Reballers.com is where you can go. If you want to support what Dan and I do, we're going to be launching a playoff game. You know it is Bowl Bingo. We played it last year. Everybody loved it. We're going to do that again, so stay tuned for more information if you want to get in on the action, compete for fabulous prizes against the Reballerhood. In the meantime, though, for myself, Ty Hildenbrandt, for that beautiful gentleman over there, Dan Rubenstein, thank you as always for tuning in, for supporting, for downloading, for listening, for just helping us through these interesting times in college football land. In the meantime, as always, stay solid.
Peace.
Diarrhea.